From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire, it's The Men's Room, a show by men, about men, and for everyone. Sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damien Licata and Forrest Seymour.
Hello everyone and welcome back to The Men's Room, the show for men, about men, for men, about men, for everyone.
For everyone.
It's that show that we do every week. Called The Men's Room, and I'm Damien Licata. This is Forrest Seymour. We are your co-hosts. This program is brought to you by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center.
Yes, indeed, which also sponsors a drop-in support group for all men in Keene at 25 Roxbury Street every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We're going to tell you more about that at the end of the show, so stay tuned.
Right.
And we have a great guest. Really honored to have a guy who drove 2.5 hours to get here, which is really...
That's right. We are really grateful and honored to have our guest here today. So, and we will get to him in a moment.
You know, I just want to tell a quick little anecdote.
Yes.
That happened yesterday. I was at a conference.
Oh, really? An anecdote?
An anecdote. Did I say that wrong?
No,
Anecdote.
you said it just fine.
Okay, thank you.
I like saying it. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. And it was a conference. Doesn't matter what it was on. But at the question and answer period, at the very end of the whole day thing, I raised a question about gender, about men. You know, there was some research that seemed to all be done on women's subjects, and it's like, so what about doing
just
research
a troublemaker.
I know. Yeah. This was the interesting thing. So during the whole question and answer period at the end, there've been people pop up this question, that question. You know, once I brought up the sort of gender question, it just held everyone's. I mean, all sorts of people had opinions on the panel, in the audience. It went on for like 10 minutes on this, which was just so. It was interesting. I mean, I feel like the talking about gender, bringing in issues around gender is just, people are hungry for it, and it's on their minds. They want to talk about it. It's what we do here in the men's room, and it's what our guest does in a lot of his work. And so
that's right. Yeah, I mean it is. I mean it's something that we are constantly hearing about in popular culture. You know, there's all of these men are from Mars, women are from Venus, all these sort of pop ideas about gender, about what men are, what women are. But I don't think people really feel like that answers that's the whole story. It can't be that simple.
A little more complicated.
Yeah.
So we'll get into a little bit.
We try to flesh a little of that out.
Yeah. Right now, right today.
Right today. So let's get to it.
Our guest today is, and I'm going to butcher his last name, I know, Mike Geanoalis, who is an original member of the New Hampshire Commission on the Status of Men, which he joined, was originally formed in 2004. Which is part of his effort to repair the father-child connection, which he's worked on in various ways for many years. He was a member of the first Governor's Commission on Child Support in '86. He was a member of the State Study Committee on the Family Law Task Force. He's been a resident of New Hampshire since 1962. He has a technology background, worked at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and the Postal Service, retired in '89, and since then, and I'm guessing before, he's attended a lot of workshops on various social matters, and clearly has a lot of energy for this work and has donated a lot of his time. And thank you, Mike, for joining us here in the men's room.
Oh, you're welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you coming all the way down here.
I hope I can contribute.
Well, tell
it.
Sure we touched very briefly before the show, and I just want to take a minute now for you to say a little bit about. I mean, clearly you have a lot of energy issues around fathers and around these sorts of issues. I mean, what's the thumbnail story about where you get that energy from?
Well, I guess I have a passion for this cause. There's an element deep within inside me that's that some would call the hurt child, and that comes from having lost who I consider to be a prince of a father when I was 7 years old. You know, all of a sudden, my sister and I found ourselves 1,200 miles away from our dad, and on retrospect, you know, and looking back at that, I said, how the heck did that happen? How could society sponsor such a thing as, you know, the separation of a valued father from his children? And the experience stunned me in a way that I was not able to verbalize until way later on in life. And it affected me. I think it might have even impacted my own marriage. I had difficulty with my own marriage. I could easily say that I had a difficult wife, but you know, we don't need to wonder about what both sides of the stories are.
It takes two to tango.
Yes, it does. But I consider myself to be a good father, a good provider. I risked my life on submarines, you know, gathering data, analyzing data, traveling a lot to provide for my family and getting the material things. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're too materialistic.
So you have you have some very personal, deep, old pieces of you that has led you to feel that the connection between fathers and children is really
motivated.
Is really important, and you can feel that, and you can see that. So.
Yes. And I'm especially so when I think about the research on the role of the father in child development, and it seemed as a kind of a divine providence that while walking through the library, and I worked a library, I looked down at the tray where a book was being returned called The Role of the Father in Child Development. And I immediately snatched that up and ended up buying a copy. It was a very expensive textbook, but I refer to that as my second Bible, actually. There's a lot of value. 1981 edition, The Role of the Father in Child Development. Check it out. It's a valuable resource.
Oh, good.
Underutilized.
So, and most recently, and what I think we're going to try to really talk about today is your involvement with the New Hampshire Commission on the Status of Men.
Yes.
Can you give us again sort of a thumbnail history of where that?
When Bill came forward first in 1999 to establish a commission on the status of men, it immediately attracted my attention. You know, yes, we need this really bad. So I jumped on and tried to help get it passed. And in the beginning, you know, we were getting comments, the most classic one coming from Representative Frank Saporato. He says, "What? Commission on the Status of Men? That's going into the circular. No need to worry about that one." But later on, told us, after examining the data that we gave him about the fatherless rates, how fatherlessness impacts children, the suicide rates of fathers, and the mortality rates from dying 10 years sooner, and you know, whole litany of things. He became one of its staunchest supporters. But still, the bill was revised in the Senate to instead of creating a commission on the status of men, to create a committee to study the problem. So we had to go through a year of that, and we came up. I tried very hard to get appointed to that, which I did. I served on that committee as well. And we ended up with a report that ended up selling the legislature unanimously by a voice vote to get this thing done.
So this committee was originally then...
Commission, you mean?
Well, you said there was a committee first.
A legislative committee to study the
problem.
To study the status.
Determine whether the commission would even make sense?
Yes.
Right. And then it was found that it would, that there were a lot of reasons to do it based on that report, committee's report.
Yeah, I think it's very important to point out that the legislature, even after the bill was submitted, added a little clause in there saying that fatherless children are the highest users of state-funded services.
Yeah.
I've been extremely interested in that clause ever since it appeared, and we're going to spend a considerable amount of energy finding out just how expensive it is to the state to look the other way while children and fathers are being separated from the other, from each other.
There's
spit it out.
It's an interesting perspective that I think that is often put forward by what I think probably considered fathers' rights groups or
fathers' rights, sure.
Yeah,
everybody has to have rights.
Right. So, but that has a connotation just as any name of any group does.
Sounds kind of offensive, doesn't it?
It does.
Fathers' rights.
It can. So, and of course, it indicates something about the priority of the fathers, for example. It's interpreted that way, that, well, you know, when we're talking about issues of custody and parents and children, isn't it the children's rights that's really important?
Yes, truly.
So that's part of this.
I'm very much in sympathy with that appraisal. Yes, I am.
Right. So, but a couple of the things that you said so far sort of indicate that there's this idea that fathers are separated, being separated from their children, and that, for example, that you had mentioned even with your own father that there was some circumstance in which you asked the question, what does it say about a society that they would condone?
How did that happen? Sure.
Yeah, and so, but the question I have is, what is the father's role in that separation? What is that man's role in that? Where does his responsibility in that separation?
Well, you know, up until about a generation or so ago, there was a total and complete vacuum in terms of the research on how important fathers are for children.
Right.
And prior to that, and now, today, fathers are spending their time in the workplace because they see themselves as material providers. You know, go down the factory and bring home the bacon and provide for the children. They see themselves in that role. So when the stresses take place that might separate one parent from another, you know, the father, either by force or natural gravity, descends to this. Now he's out of the family picture. See, I don't believe
he was assigned is no longer.
He was assigned in the role he assigned to himself, even, and the role some women assign men,
Sure.
which is what my mother did to us. She assigned him to the hinterland by moving us 1,200 miles away in an act that I consider parental alienation today. It's parental alienation syndrome, I believe, is quite serious.
That's another controversial issue as to whether that is even.
Yeah, but I see where you're going about, you know, a lot of the problems should be placed in the laps of fathers. I think that's what you mean.
Well, I'm just saying you can't. To my mind, you can't look at the problem of fatherlessness or of the separation of fathers from their children without also looking at the father's responsibility in that, not just seeing the father as a victim.
I agree. I agree with you. We need to look at the responsibility that should be allocated to all parties when that takes place.
Right.
And I'm thinking specifically of government paternalism when I say that.
So talk about that a little bit. I mean, I mean, this is an issue that I know the Commission has looked into, and that you know the fathers' rights community, if that is, if we can, you know, if there is such a gelled thing as that.
I think if you look on the web, you'll find there is.
There is, yes, okay.
There's other issues too, by the way, on the Commission's, excuse me,
yes,
on the Commission and the status of men. You know, there's health problems accruing seriously to men, educational problems.
Right.
Boys are falling behind a year and a half behind girls.
Absolutely.
And the list goes on and on.
Right.
And our report can be seen at nh.gov/CSM.
Okay,
whoever's interested in it.
There's a PDF version of it on there.
We'll have you repeat
but
that.
I interrupted you.
Well, no, that's fine. I just want to add too that because I do some work at the college here in town, and I you know, the incoming class of first-year students, what we used to call freshmen, but first-year students, is predominantly female. I mean, it's I forget the numbers exactly, but it's 60-40 split at this point. That so that educational issue is playing out into higher
education. Postgraduate school, I think the
Yeah.
disparity is higher than that.
Yep.
So and I completely forget what I was going to say.
Well, I think the
It had to do with paternalism in government.
Right. Well, I just wanted to maybe sort of. Right. It's important to know the Commission has touched on lots of different issues, and that the issue around paternalism or custody, child custody, is just one piece of what the Commission has done. But it is a real hot button one, and I'm wondering if you,
which one is the hot button one now?
the child custody is what I'm.
A child. Most of the people that walk in the door to attend that meeting have these custody issues burning in their hearts and minds.
Most of the people who come to the Commission meetings.
Yeah, they're not coming because they're dying sooner. They're not coming because they're committing suicide. They just go off and kill themselves. It's this emotional violence of separation from their kids, their families, their wives, their property. They're being discarded. That is where you'll hear the complaints coming from you know, these fathers are coming down complaining about custody and divorce.
Yep.
So this is what the public who is energized to come to your meetings, come to your hearings, these are the issues.
Yeah, and people are offended by it. And I'm offended that people are offended because...
I think it's a question of balance. I think that a lot of people wonder, you say most of the people that come to talk about that are fathers in that situation, or who have felt that they've been wronged by the courts or been disenfranchised. But
by government policy, there's a lot of things going on within the welfare department too.
Yeah.
More than just the courts.
Yeah. But are you confident, and is the Commission confident, that it has heard all sides of the stories? That it knows how many folks have come before that Commission? And I understand that it's up to them to do that. But has the Commission felt confident that it has heard from the mothers in those cases or similar cases?
Well, you know, we have a commission for the status of men here. There is also a commission for the status of women.
But don't you want your commission to present unbiased information based on the full picture? Or
I would very much welcome
an
unbiased,
presenting
complete...
a certain viewpoint?
Yes, I very much support that notion that we should examine all aspects of the problem of fatherlessness. And I would encourage it. There's been talk of inviting the Women's Commission to come on over, and we'll have a little discussion back and forth.
That would be great.
About all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I had a conversation with some women who came, I think, to the hearing in Keene, came to the hearing here. And this is just anecdotal, there's that word again. But they reported feeling unwelcome at the hearing. And
which hearing was this?
I think this was some years ago. There was a hearing in Keene. I didn't attend. Am I right? Or maybe it wasn't in Keene.
No.
Some women from Keene who had gone when you were doing hearings around the state.
I think you're talking about the civilian council on the courts or something like that. There was a...
No, this was related to the Commission.
Commission on the status of men?
Yes.
Yeah, there was sort of taking...
I don't think so.
It felt like... I mean, I have to... let me say how I can readily imagine how that might happen, too, because...
How what might happen?
How certain parties might feel that the unwelcome, or that it might have felt like a hostile environment.
First, we need to establish that the Commission created a hostile environment for women, which I don't believe it did.
Right.
So
I understand that.
I think this was the Supreme Court's commission to study the courts. I believe it. I believe that's what you're.
Well, didn't you attended a open meeting that the Commission had?
I attended with Jim Duffy, who was at that time working with us in the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, and we went down there to one of the meetings, the public hearings, I guess, that the Commission was holding.
The Commission was not holding public hearings.
This was
Men's Commission.
Yes, you were there, and
this was a regular meeting.
It was probably a regular meeting.
You sort of took them on the road for a while. Went to different towns. They had the meetings in different towns. This was like 3 years ago.
Well, this was, I don't know if they were going around to different towns.
Well, anyway, all right, let's assume
we were at one of your meetings. I know that. And it wasn't in Keene.
Okay.
And I think it was Concord, actually.
With the Legislative Office Building in Concord, one of our monthly meetings.
Yeah, it was. And and there was no question that there was the predominance of the people testifying there and in attendance there were the men that you've alluded to, the men who were feeling that they had been wronged, the men who also men who had in general had what.
Isn't it wonderful that men have an outlet now, a place where they can go to ventilate these things? Besides,
I think that's a good thing that they can be heard. Absolutely, but
by the way, you guys are doing a great job of examining.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of what we do is I I think, important for men to be able to come and talk safely about really anything, including those kinds of issues. So, but there was a clear sort of hostility to our suggestion that, for example, the kind of suggestion that I made here today, that men have a responsibility to in these situations, that fathers have a responsibility, that men have a responsibility in addressing the kind of male perpetrated violence that we see in our society. And we haven't even begun to talk yet about domestic violence, which is another controversial issue.
That's a hot topic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And so, but there was a clear, and we received some pretty.
I remember
vociferous mail after that appearance.
You received negative vibes from males who were there to complain about being falsely accused, you know, being removed on one-sided testimony before a court of law in which they didn't have the opportunity to face their accusers, that sort of thing. And then they had to listen to, oh, just suck it up, guys. You know, you're the cause of the problem.
Well, I would certainly take issue with that characterization, because we certainly didn't do that.
You think that's how they heard?
That's how they heard it. That's how I heard it.
Okay. Well, I think what we were validating their experience, but trying to provide some balance as well.
I think it's a subtle thing to say, to say you have been mistreated, and it is your responsibility to fix that. That's I don't know, subtle. That's a hard thing to hear.
Right.
It is, in fact, the way it's a tough one. It is, in fact, the way life treats us in many, many arenas, whether it be work or relationship. Things happen that are unfair. And you know, the person who mistreats us is not the one who is going to fix it. Like, well, we have the responsibility. And I just want
let's assume everything that you say is true. What about the chance for either party, be it male or female, to have a chance to present a rebuttal to the other side of the argument that's brought before a third person arbitrator?
And I think that what as I understand the mission of the New Hampshire Commission on the Status of Men is about men taking responsibility. You know, you and the other members
taking responsibility for what?
For saying
the effort to get a fair hearing?
Yes, absolutely. To say,
well,
this is happening. Yeah, I think that's exactly what you're doing.
We're trying to do that. You would not believe the obstacles.
Right.
That, I mean, it's just not likely to happen anytime soon.
I think it's a challenging thing, and I think it's also challenging because from a lot of people's perspectives, men have it pretty good, and we here, sitting here, may or may not agree with that. But
I certainly don't agree with that.
Right, I know. I think that that's the popular perception, is that men have
the
privilege.
Popular perception.
Yes.
Well, not anymore. I think with the voice vote that we experienced up in the legislature this past time around, I think there's a general consensus out there that says, yeah, we've got to recognize there's a problem here. Yeah. Men are not as well off as we heretofore thought, and that we need to get this commission going. And there was a lot of support up in the legislature. And this, I think, my sense is that there's general support amongst the public as well. But I have measuring that.
Yeah. Well, we are beginning to run out of time already. Yeah. Do you have something else? We haven't gotten to talk about domestic violence issues.
We have not done that yet, and I would actually want to invite you to come back again, and so that we could continue this conversation, because there's a lot.
But in the interim, could I make a homework assignment, or maybe we could make homework assignments of each other in anticipation of this domestic violence tete-a-tete? Look at the statistics on domestic violence rates in lesbian relationships and compare them with the other end of the extreme, where the least amount of domestic violence rates are taking place. Now, I would be interested to see that. The relevance of that is something we could talk about. What I'm alluding to is that women are not, their hands are not clean on this domestic violence.
Right. I don't think anybody could. I mean, well, I don't want to say that. There may be those who do, but I certainly wouldn't be among those who would say that women do not perpetrate violence. I think, though, that it's a much more complicated issue than just numbers, and that would be something that I would like to talk about too.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So
give me a homework assignment.
Sure. Well, I'll email you something. Okay. And we'll come back, and I'd like to talk about it some more. I think it's a very complicated issue. There are a lot of factors involved in the reality and the perception that both that men are not getting a fair shake in society. Sure. There's a lot of things that contribute to how men are socialized, that contribute to how men behave, that then contributes to the state that men are in.
Look up the data on the cycle of violence too, and find out where kids are getting hit the most.
Well, you know, I just want to say that I think, you know, I think that you know, clearly, you and the people that really care about men and the quality of men's lives, which I think is the thing that we all
I care about fathers, biological fathers too, not caring men. You know, like in the Boys to Men program, which is a valuable institution, by the way. But natural biological fathers as being what's best for children.
So I
in most cases, or in some cases, there are situations where the biological father might be best not in the picture.
There's no comparison between the positive effects that a natural father has on children as opposed to
assuming he's not
as a general ordinary rule.
I'm going to have to get my technical director in here to get you guys to push the pause button. We'll come back. And
it's hard to let a statement like all biological fathers are the best thing for the
ordinarily
children.
Ordinarily. Excuse me. I stand corrected.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us today. It's been great having you here on the Men's Room, and I look forward to continuing down the road.
Thanks, Mike. I hope I wasn't too difficult.
I welcome that kind of back and forth.
I think the best way to get some these issues is to really talk about the controversies.
Right at the gut level.
Sure. We'll pick it up again. So we just have a minute to say
thank you. And we want to remind folks about our support group that meets every Sunday night.
That's right.
We meet at the Life Arts Center here in Keene, New Hampshire. It's at 7 o'clock, 7 to 9.
Yep, 25 Roxbury Street.
Open to all men. You can see these brochures around town. If you see one, pick one up. It gives you more information.
And check out our website. The URL will roll with our credits.
That's right.
And we'll be back next week, and we look forward to seeing you here and on the web, and have a great week.
Thanks.
So, thank you.